We wound up driving them to school after about 40 minutes of the bus not coming.
We're not optimistic having Dr. Martirano leading leading Howard County at that position. We think he should be held accountable.
Yeah, it was a chaotic start again to the school year this morning for Howard County parents struggling to get their kids to class.
Yeah, not only did several buses arrive late again today, a new bus company canceled more than a dozen bus routes with little notice given to parents.
So Fox 45's Rebecca Pryor reports some parents want the superintendent to come up with a solution or step down. Rebecca?
Yeah, Mary and Kai, the problems are coming from a new out-of-state bus company who, without warning this week, told parents that they don't have enough drivers to cover about 20 routes that they were scheduled to have. It's putting parents in a bad spot, some of whom are now demanding the Howard County superintendent be held responsible.
It's very unacceptable.
Howard County's back-to-school bus struggles continuing to drive into day 2 of the school year.
We got the email saying that the route was canceled.
Teresa Andrews, just one of many parents affected by the 20 bus routes suddenly canceled late Monday night. The school system sending this notice out at 11 p.m., giving little time for families to make alternate arrangements.
Fortunately, I'm home. What about parents that aren't home?
Meanwhile, other parents complaining their buses still showing up late as the school system's new bus contractor admits to bringing in drivers from out of state.
She said, "I'm sorry, we just got in from Spokane, Washington. And we're not familiar with Maryland. We're not familiar with these routes."
Finding out that the bus drivers did not practice the route, that is not a good representation of what we're dealing with.
The company behind the dozens of delays and cancellations, Zoom Transportation, a California-based tech company, awarded a 3-year, $27 million contract, accounting for more than half of the school system's total bus budget. In a statement sent to Fox 45, Zoom claiming, quote, Howard County has historically faced a major driver shortage and offering no timeline for when they'll be able to cover all of their contracted routes.
My husband is a bus driver for Howard County with a different contractor, and I know that there are companies like his where the drivers don't have enough routes. Instead of us having to drive our kids to school, they need to use some of the existing contracts to fill these routes.
And Andrew is far from the only parent voicing frustrations. Complaints continuing to pour in on social media, and overnight, this online petition demanding Superintendent Dr. Michael Martirano resign, gathering more than 200 signatures. The petition reading in part, "Our students deserve better. We believe that new leadership is necessary to restore confidence in the administration and ensure the well-being of our children's education."
The district signing to giving away all the bus contracts to one company that has no track record in Maryland whatsoever.
If he's doing all that and disrupting the lives of our children and their education, we think he should be held accountable.
Now, today I reached out to the school system and the superintendent asking for a response to that petition and then also asking for a timeline for when all of these bus issues will be resolved. They didn't have any answers for me today, but did tell me that a press conference is expected to be held tomorrow.
And Rebecca.
A nonprofit trying to curb crime in Baltimore has found itself the victim of crime again.
Fox 45's Maxine Stryker reports from Morrill Park with their story.
The guardian angels say this is the 5th time in just the past 2 years that they have been broken into. This time, they say the thieves busted through this gate here and broke the window, getting inside.
They know when we're in here, when we're not in here.
It came as no surprise
How desperate do you have to be?
as the guardian angels discovered their headquarters at a church in Morrill Park.
And we realize, okay, the doors are open, stuff's broken into, stuff's missing again.
Were broken into once again.
They pried this open, went down there, busted the window, reached inside, and opened the door and came in that way this time.
Marcus Strider Dent, who leads the nonprofit group striving to make a difference in communities riddled with crime, says this is the 5th time in the past 2 years their headquarters have been ransacked.
Luckily for us, since they've broken in so many times, we don't have much left to take. We're still trying to rebuild what they took from us before, computers, televisions, all that stuff.
This was the scene in 2021 where thieves left extensive damage inside.
We're the guardian angels, for goodness sake. You know what I mean? we cannot catch a break here.
Dent doesn't feel they're being targeted for who they are. Instead, he says it's just the nature of the neighborhood.
It's all about the fact that the criminals basically have more rights than the victims.
According to police data, there have been a total of 248 crimes in Morrill Park this year, including 4 homicides, 16 robberies, 20 burglaries, and 82 larcenies.
There's no consequences in Baltimore anymore for anybody. Crime's pretty much legal. We've all been hit by the crime.
At a community meeting just last month, residents expressed frustration with crime, many pointing to drugs as the problem.
Guy got murdered broad daylight, right in front of my house.
As Dent works to make sure another break-in doesn't happen,
The place is going to become sort of like a fortress, and we cover the cost for all this.
he's concerned someone will get hurt if they're targeted again.
What concerns me is it's escalating. You know, somebody comes in here and one of the angels are here. You know, I don't know what my angels hurt.
Police say at this time no arrests have been made. In Baltimore, Maxine Stryker, Fox 45 News.
Continue our coverage tonight after another child is let go following a car theft. In this video, you can see a man holding a child at the scene of a crime. The 11-year-old boy allegedly stole a car, then crashed it into the man's car. When police arrived, they let the child go, saying he couldn't be held accountable for his actions because of his age. Well, this morning, Fox 45's Megan Gillen spoke with a law enforcement expert about the state's juvenile justice laws and the chances parents will have to face consequences for their children's actions.
You're taking a look at video here of a juvenile being let out of handcuffs after police say he crashed a stolen car into another vehicle. You can see police returning him to his mother because he is too young to face charges under state law. The Juvenile Justice Reform Act limits children under 13 from facing charges and says a juvenile under 10 cannot be charged. And law enforcement expert Mari Richards believes that needs to change.
Needs to be a special session of the legislature. This is an emergency. The law that raised that minimum needs to be repealed. It doesn't get any simpler than that.
There are, interestingly, calls for parents to be punished now, possibly even with jail time, when their children cannot be held accountable. Would this work?
I'm in favor of that. Realistically, that's never going to get passed in this legislature. The thing is, you know, the people who are behind this, they think they're helping these kids. Well, first of all, they're not helping victims, but they're setting these kids up for a lifetime of prison.
Fox 45 News reached out to every state's attorney in Maryland asking questions about juvenile crime. You can hear their reactions and more from this interview with Mari Richards on foxbaltimore.com. I'm Megan Gillen, Fox 45 News.
Well, the youth crime crisis is not just a Baltimore issue. Police arresting 5 suspects in an attempted car theft last night. Just before midnight, officers responded to a scene in Glen Burnie where they found a group tampering with a vehicle. While arresting the group, officers found a semi-automatic handgun. 2 of the suspects were just 17 years old.
Will you face higher taxes in the future? Last week, Governor Wes Moore said the state needed to start spending responsibly to avoid an economic crisis.
The governor repeatedly saying the state needs discipline in its spending, while not saying specifically what needs to change.
Tonight, we're joined by Christopher Summers, president of the Maryland Public Policy Institute. Mr. Summers, thank you for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, the state could be facing that nearly $2 billion deficit in just 5 years. The governor touched on that. What's driving this deficit?
Well, I think the number one thing that's driving the deficit, and that it's going to drive the deficit for every year going forward, is the cost of the Kerwin plan. And that is something, when you look at the governor's speech at the recent MACO conference, Maryland Association of Counties, that's the one issue that was not talked about. But you're looking at an education spending plan that is $4 billion annually. Now, there's obviously been repeated notion that it's $4 billion by 2033. However, the true cost to state and local governments is over $40 billion by 2033. So the big question is, how do you pay for that? And that's why I think that next session, the priority issue will be which taxes are they going to raise?
So, Mr. Summers, when Governor Hogan left office, the state had, what, a surplus of a couple of $2 billion. Any idea where that stands now? And how does the state continue to pay for these education initiatives without putting a burden on Maryland taxpayers?
Correct. I think when Governor Hogan left office, he left the state of Maryland with about close to a $3 billion budget. In 90 days of this session this year, I think they've already burned through about 45% of that. And so going forward, and actually I'll use FOX45 News, I think, to go on record, the Maryland Public Policy Institute believes that the state of Maryland should actually pause the implementation of the Kerwin plan because of the fiscal impact and the responsibility on the counties for the county portion of paying for this. You're already seeing it this year where Montgomery County first floated a 10% property tax increase with the county executive saying the revenue will go solely to education. And you're looking at like Anne Arundel County that also raised taxes. So this is a big concern among the county executives of the fiscal responsibility for paying for Kerwin. And the big question is, how do you pay for it?
And I'm going to throw another governor's name out there as well. Governor O'Malley, when he was in office, he, instead of raising taxes, implemented a lot of fees. Do you think we will see fees come out of this instead of, just tax increases?
Probably, but more probably there was actually a bill in the legislature this session, did not get out of committee. And what it would do, it would allow counties to, because we have in Maryland a local income tax, piggyback tax, and it would allow counties that are already at that cap of 3.2% to raise their cap to 3.7. So I think you will probably see that come back next session. But also I think at the state level, you will probably see the income tax brackets change, meaning that the Moore administration and the majority of the legislature will probably want a more progressive income tax brackets in the state of Maryland, which will ultimately lead, as we did see after 8 years of the O'Malley administration, you will see more taxpayers leaving the state of Maryland.
All right. Christopher Summers, president of the Maryland Public Policy Institute, thank you so much for talking with us tonight and giving us your expertise. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
For many local public school students, this week marked the return to school. And while students are getting back in the classroom, problems continue to mount at the Maryland State Department of Education.
As Project Baltimore's Chris Papps explains, some lawmakers are calling for a special hearing in Annapolis to learn more about what Fox 45 has exposed.
It's potentially a crime that has been committed if we're willfully deleting public records.
Maryland State Delegate Ryan Naraki wants answers.
I'm extremely concerned. Some of my other colleagues are also very concerned.
The Baltimore County representative, over the past few months,
98 text messages
has been watching Project Baltimore's investigation into Maryland State Superintendent Mohammed Chaudhry. We discovered that text messages on the superintendent's state-issued cell phone were deleted after we filed a public records request to see them, a potential violation of state law.
Do you still have your state-issued cell phone set to delete text messages at 30 days?
We also exposed a secondary email account that the superintendent's been using to conduct state business.
It's extremely important.
Naraki is calling on Maryland House and Senate leadership to call for a special hearing in Annapolis to learn how deep the problems go.
Is this one individual? Is this the superintendent, or is this a pervasive issue inside of the system? How many others could be potentially operating in ways like this that aren't as transparent and accountable as they should be to the public, to parents and others?
As well as Chaudhry's future as superintendent is uncertain. His contract expires next June. For the past 2 months, the State Board of Education has delayed voting on a new contract.
So there's that level as well.
But time is running out. According to board policy, contract negotiations must be completed by the end of September.
What does it tell you that he hasn't received the contract yet?
I mean, I think that there's probably some concerns about deleting text messages and, having secret email accounts.
But Chaudhry is fighting for his job. Project Baltimore obtained this 9-page apology letter Chaudhry sent to Senate President Bill Ferguson and House Speaker Adrian Jones, along with 9 other lawmakers involved in education policy. The letter, sent on June 30th, acknowledged missteps and frustrations. Project Baltimore emailed those 9 lawmakers asking whether the superintendent had reached out to them for a meeting, and if so, what topics were discussed. We also asked each one, do you support renewing Chaudhry's contract? Senator Mary Washington confirmed she received the letter, but she has not gotten a request for a meeting from the superintendent. We did not hear back from the other lawmakers.
It's not my decision.
The letter was also sent to Governor Wes Moore. During a recent interview with political commentator Armstrong Williams, Governor Moore was asked if he believes Superintendent Chaudhry deserves a new contract. The governor would not say yes or no.
I think he's a very talented educator. The results we have right now in the state of Maryland, they are unsatisfactory.
It certainly feels like there is some element of disarray.
The veto is overridden.
Over the next 8 years, Maryland will invest $30 billion additional tax dollars into public education as part of the blueprint for Maryland's future, also known as the Kirwan Plan. Naraki does not have a vote on Chaudhry's future, but he told Project Baltimore if the State Board of Education offers the superintendent a new contract, in light of FOX45's recent reporting, it should come with strings attached.
He needs to talk to guys like you. He needs to be accountable to parents as well. So if the contract is extended, I would hope that there would be some real serious accountability measures inside of that new contract.
Project Baltimore reached out to Senate President Bill Ferguson and Speaker of the House Adrian Jones, asking if they would consider calling for a special hearing into the Maryland State Department of Education. If we hear back, we'll let you know. I'm Chris Pabst, and this is Project Baltimore.
All right, folks, who made the cut and who's off the team? What we're learning right now as the Ravens finalize, sort of, their roster.
And rain and thunderstorms are moving in from the south and west, but then there's this. Idalia, I'm going to let you know if that's going to have any impacts on our forecast. Going to be a major hurricane as it hits Florida tomorrow. All my Weather Authority forecast.
Some say there's a disconnect between a state lawmaker and prosecutors across Maryland. Why a bill sponsored by Senator Jill Carter is called into question.
Baltimore City residents have another chance to make their concerns and take their concerns to Acting Police Commissioner Richard Worley. What we can expect at his final public town hall before his confirmation.
Hurricane Idalia barreling toward Florida tonight. The precautions being taken in place.
Live from WBFF in Baltimore, this is Fox 45 News at 5.
Breaking news right now. Video into Fox 45's newsroom shows the moments before a man dies in the custody of Baltimore police.
The incident happened last month downtown near the convention center. Now, according to state investigators, police were called to the report of a man who was threatening others and wanted to take his life. He has been identified as 29-year-old Trey Ellinger from Glen Burnie. You can see police put him in handcuffs for transport. The state is not showing what happened inside the ambulance. We don't know how and when Ellinger passed away. The investigation is ongoing.
I do think maybe law enforcement is misconstruing the law.
It's becoming more and more difficult to hold juveniles accountable.
They know that, nothing's really going to happen to them if they keep their crime in a certain limit of types of crime.
Tonight, Maryland Senator Jill Carter is clashing with top prosecutors in Maryland.
failed to pass last year.
How many juveniles are responsible for hundreds of auto thefts and carjackings that have occurred in the past week? Alexa Ashwell continues our team coverage with the latest data. Alexa?
Yes, Kai, auto thefts and carjackings are happening every day across the city of Baltimore. We want to show you some newly released surveillance. This is a picture of a suspect who investigators say committed an armed carjacking in Upper Fells Point back in July. Metro Crime Stoppers is now putting a $4,000 reward on the table for information leading to an arrest in this case. Carjackings, auto thefts continue to plague the city of Baltimore. In just 1 week, there have been 26 carjackings and 227 auto thefts. That's according to BPD's crime mapping data. Overall, the city is experiencing a more than 200% increase in auto thefts compared to this time last year. Law enforcement experts warn these cars are often used to commit other crimes.
The general reason why cars are stolen nowadays or carjacked is to provide a vehicle to commit other crimes. And by and large, those crimes are being committed by juveniles, some as young as 12, 13 years old.
Now, that 7-week data we just shared with you, I asked Baltimore police of those crimes committed, how many of them were committed by juveniles. I'm still waiting to hear back. Reporting live in Baltimore, Alexa Ashwell, Fox 45 News.
Thank you, Alexa. As the state legislature and law enforcement struggle with youth crime policy, there have been serious concerns within the Department of Juvenile Services. Last year's report from the Maryland Attorney General's office detailed chronic boredom among children in the facilities with limited access to books and programs. Governor Wes Moore has ordered a top-to-bottom review of the department, but those results haven't been announced at this time. Last week, Baltimore Mayor Brandon Scott called for an overhaul of DJS following a string of violent incidents involving teens. Mackenzie Frost asked the Secretary of DJS, Vincent Schiraldi, about the mayor's comments.
Would you agree with that?
The mayor said a lot of things in that quote.
But does it need to be rebuilt like he said?
Rebuilt. It depends on what you mean by rebuilt. So I don't want to sort of pick away the mayor's description. We need to improve CD. We need to improve conditions in our facilities. We need to focus on the kids that are involved in gun violence most. That's really our biggest challenge.
That brings us to our question of the day. Who do you believe is responsible for the juvenile crime crisis? Parents, lawmakers, both, or none of the above? To make your voice heard, go to foxbaltimore.com/vote. A nonprofit working to curb crime in Baltimore has found itself the victim of crime again. Fox 45's Maxine Stryker reports from Morrow Park with their story.
The Guardian Angels say this is the 5th time in just the past 2 years that they have been broken into. This time, they say the thieves busted through this gate here and broke the window, getting inside.
They know when we're in here, when we're not in here.
It came as no surprise.
How desperate do you have to be?
As the Guardian Angels discovered their headquarters at a church in Morrell Park.
And we realized, okay, the doors are open, stuff's broken into, stuff's missing. Again.
Were broken into once again.
They pried this open, went down there, busted the window, reached inside, and opened the door and came in that way this time.
Marcus Strider-Dent, who leads the nonprofit group striving to make a difference in communities riddled with crime, says this is the 5th time in the past 2 years their headquarters have been ransacked.
Luckily for us, since they've broken in so many times, we don't have much left to take. We're still trying to rebuild what they took from us before, computers, televisions, all that stuff.
This was the scene in 2021 where thieves left extensive damage inside.
We're the Guardian Angels, for goodness sake. You know what I mean? we cannot catch a break here.
Dent doesn't feel they're being targeted for who they are. Instead, he says it's just the nature of the neighborhood.
It's all about the fact that the criminals basically have more rights than the victims.
According to police data, there have been a total of 248 crimes in Morrell Park this year, including 4 homicides, 16 robberies, 20 burglaries, and 82 larcenies.
There's no consequences in Baltimore anymore for anybody. Crime's pretty much legal.
We've all been hit by the crime.
At a community meeting just last month, residents expressed frustration with crime, many pointing to drugs as the problem.
Guy got murdered broad daylight, right in front of my house.
As Dent works to make sure another break-in doesn't happen.
The place is going to become sort of like a fortress, and we cover the cost for all this.
He's concerned someone will get hurt if they're targeted again.
What concerns me is it's escalating. You know, somebody comes in here and one of the angels are here. You know, I don't know what my Angels hurt.
Police say at this time, no arrests have been made. In Baltimore, Maxine Stryker, Fox 45 News.
Still ahead tonight, new polling numbers show surprising bumps for some GOP presidential candidates who's gaining momentum while others are losing ground. And the Ravens face a daunting task to reduce the number of players on the team. We have the latest on roster cuts.
Plus, the live look from Florida as residents prepare for the impact of Hurricane Idalia, the latest efforts from the National Guard.
And we're tracking any potential impacts from Idalia as well as other tropical systems in the Atlantic as we head towards the Labor Day holiday weekend. And if you want to scrape in a little bit of grilling tonight, I think you may have a couple of showers to deal with. Nothing that's going to cancel your plans, but you may have to run inside for a second here. Temperatures fall from the 80s into the 70s. Let you know when full sun returns and if Idalia is going to have anything to say about that coming up in my Weather Authority forecast. Tonight, I think you may have a couple of showers to deal with. Nothing that's going to cancel your plans, but you may have to run inside for a second here. Temperatures fall from the 80s into the 70s. Let you know when full sun returns and if Idalia is going to have anything to say about that coming up in my Weather Authority forecast.
Fox 45 News, winner of 16 2022 Regional Emmy Awards, more than all other Baltimore news stations combined.
The NFL deadline for all teams to be down to 53-man roster from 90 has come and gone. 37 cuts needed to be made, and they have been starting all week. But 16 players could come back on certain teams' practice squads, including the Ravens. Now, the Ravens made 7 roster cuts yesterday. The biggest was Maryland undrafted rookie Dante Demas. The rest were done today, some before practice this afternoon, some after. No real surprises. There were only one starting job up for grabs, and that went to left guard John Simpson. The rest were for openings with reserve roles, roster depth, and improvement. The biggest name reportedly cut, running back Melvin Gordon, the 30-year-old, was entering year 9, was pushed out due to undrafted rookie Keaton Mitchell's solid summer. Not a surprise when watching, but Mitchell was a long shot to win this job. Wide receiver James Prochet also cut, but that comes at no surprise. One spot was open at receiver, and Tylan Wallace appears to have won that battle. Still doesn't make this day easy for anyone, but it's part of the business.
Guys did a nice job. They always do. I thought everybody's businesslike. Everybody understands what we need to get done as a team today, and they did a good job of it. You know, the big picture, the process, the way you handle it, and still you try to do what's in the best interest of your team, and you really try to, allow decisions to make themselves based on the way guys play and practice and perform.
The Ravens have yet to formally release their 53-man roster. The deadline was at 4, so we still have roster question marks. The biggest would be how many quarterbacks are they going to keep on that initial 53?
Morgan, thank you. And taking you live to Key West tonight, Storm Idalia strengthens to a Category 3 hurricane and is expected to make landfall tomorrow morning along Florida's Gulf Coast. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says the state is prepped and ready, but residents in major storm surge areas need to follow those evacuation orders.
If you are in one of those areas that's in line for some of the major storm surge and you're told to evacuate, you have time to do that, but you got to do that now.
Well, the Coast Guard has rescue boats in Florida waiting for Hurricane Idalia to make landfall. The National Hurricane Center projects the storm could have winds up to 120 miles per hour and further damage areas still recovering from last year's Hurricane Ian.
This is kind of like the 1-2 punch, the whammy. We're also keeping an eye on Hurricane Franklin. The good news, Franklin isn't expected to make landfall in the United States. However, Labor Day weekend could be impacted, and that's because of what's known as dangerous rip currents. You can see that during the Ocean City area at any time, but Franklin apparently will exacerbate that around several beaches.
Right. On the weekend, that literally all of Maryland is heading to down the ocean, hon, as we say. Chief Meteorologist Jonathan Myers here with the latest on that
two really serious systems. The hurricane season's really been acting up over the past couple of weeks after a pretty quiet early portion of the summer. But now we've got Idalia as well as Franklin, and both these could be major hurricanes. Actually, Franklin is a major hurricane. Now, we are tracking the tropics as a stiff east wind around the outer periphery of Franklin continues to cause maybe some beach troubles, and actually likely some beach troubles, especially through the middle and end portion of this week. I think some improvements as we head into the Labor Day holiday weekend. Now, for us, some good news. We are going to have the saving grace of a cold front that's going to come through, not only making it cooler and actually giving us a little touch of fall, but it's going to keep those tropics at least directly here away from us, and it will give us a really nice Labor Day holiday weekend. The strengthening of Idalia, it's been occurring all day long, all night last night, and it is looking very healthy. Look at this very intense convection, we call it. In other words, those deep reds, that's your deep thunderstorm activity, kind of feeds the strength of this system. This is now a Category 2 hurricane, winds up to 100 miles an hour. That's just now increasing 10 miles an hour over the last advisory. This is a new advisory just coming in. So it's a strong Category 2, likely becoming a Category 3 with winds up to about 115 miles an hour, maybe even more, as it makes that impact just north of Tampa. Tampa could see 4 to 7 feet of storm surge. Places along the Big Bend of Florida, just north of Tampa, could see 10 to 15 feet of water above ground level. So this could be absolutely devastating for these folks. And then thankfully, yes, it does look like a cold front is going to press us to our south in a way. Now, there's Franklin. That's a strong storm, too. It's a Category 3, has that buzzsaw appearance to it, if you will. That's going to be headed out into the Atlantic as well. But the wind flow around it is going to push water up against our coastline. So hence the rip currents, and seas already running about 5 to 10 feet just offshore. Some of the waves could be up to about 4 to 5 feet over the next several days through the end of the week out Ocean City way and along the Delaware beaches. A couple of showers just down to our south and west. There's more even south and west of that. That's signs of our next weather maker, a cold front that's going to help us out with these systems by pushing them away. But there still could be a few showers and maybe a rumble of thunder through tonight into early tomorrow morning. There's that big cold front. Boom, pushes through tomorrow. And how about that? Say goodbye to not only Idalia, but also Franklin over the next several days into the end of the week. Right now, 80 winds out of the southeast at 7. It is muggy. It is mild. Notice the showers overnight. By about midnight, still a stray shower or thunderstorm, but things do improve by tomorrow afternoon. Could start with a couple of wet spots in the morning, but by the afternoon, it's hot, but it's turning less humid. 86, 79, gorgeous day, breezy on Thursday, warming trend, but rain-free through the Labor Day holiday weekend.
Jonathan, thanks. Still ahead tonight, school bus mayhem. Just 2 days into the new school year, the efforts now to hold school officials accountable.
How do voters view the Republican field after that fiery debate in Wisconsin? I'm Scott Thuman with a look at who saw a dip and who's gaining ground.
Well, turning now to your election 2024 coverage. Tonight, we are getting our first good look so far at how the Republican field is shaping up after last week's debate in Wisconsin. Who may have new life, and did Donald Trump skipping the event cost him any support? Sinclair's chief political correspondent Scott Thuman takes a look.
With the arrests and court cases piling up, Donald Trump's numbers on the way down. The overall leader appears to have taken a hit, suddenly giving a bit more hope to his competition based on a new post-debate poll. Emerson College noting Trump's snub may open door for other candidates. Trump, who declined to attend, saw a slight dip, losing 6 points. Former Vice President Mike Pence ticked up 4, and Nikki Haley saw the biggest bump, jumping 5 points.
I think in the first 72 hours, we raised $1 million. We've had thousands of people volunteer. It only keeps us more motivated because we have a country to save.
The surge possibly for touting her foreign policy gravitas or willingness to blame her own party for some of Washington's out-of-control spending. And Pence reminded voters how he stood up to Trump on January 6th.
Almost everybody on that stage made it clear that I did my duty that day.
Even though they all still trail Trump by a large margin, they could see this as a first step, that if Trump's not going to dominate the debates, they'll take that time to build name recognition and with it, momentum. Trump's campaign team tells us he'll skip September's debate too. And as critics say Ron DeSantis fell flat on stage, a bonus for newcomer Vivek Ramaswamy, who had the largest number of respondents say he won the debate.
I believe I can take the America First agenda even further than Donald Trump did.
Though Democrats believe the more exposure these candidates have, the more ironically it will hurt them.
The party that used to wrap themselves in the flag is the party that's talking about banning books, changing the voting age from 18 to 25. They are talking about all of these things that are extreme, and that's not where the mainstream of the American people are.
But for GOP contenders, they see even the slightest change as a chance to shake up all those political predictions. In Washington, I'm Scott Thuman.
We wound up driving them to school after about 40 minutes of the bus not coming.
Still ahead after the break, bus troubles continue during the first week of school. The demands coming from parents as their children are left stranded. And as students make their way back into the classroom, safety a top concern, what students and parents should be on the lookout for. Plus, another live look at Florida as Hurricane Idalia makes its way closer to landfall. The evacuation orders now underway.
we wound up driving them to school after about 40 minutes of the bus not coming.
We're not optimistic having Dr. Martirano leading leading Howard County at that position. We think he should be held accountable.
A chaotic start to the school year continued this morning for Howard County parents struggling to get their kids to class.
Not only did several buses arrive late again today, a new bus company canceled more than a dozen bus routes with little notice given to parents.
Fox 45's Rebecca Pryor reports some parents want the superintendent to come up with a solution or step down. Rebecca?
Yeah, Mary and Kai, the problems are stemming from a new out-of-state bus company who, without warning this week, told parents that they didn't have enough bus drivers to cover at least 20 of their routes. It's putting parents in a bad spot, some of whom are now demanding that Howard County's superintendent be held responsible.
It's very unacceptable.
Howard County's back-to-school bus struggles continuing to drive into day 2 of the school year.
We got the email saying that the route was canceled.
Teresa Andrews, just one of many parents affected by the 20 bus routes suddenly canceled late Monday night. The school system sending this notice out at 11 p.m., giving little time for families to make alternate arrangements.
Fortunately, I'm home. What about parents that aren't home?
Meanwhile, other parents complaining their buses still showing up late as the school system's new bus contractor admits to bringing in drivers from out of state.
She said, "I'm sorry, we just got in from Spokane, Washington. We're not familiar with Maryland. We're not familiar with these routes."
Finding out that the bus drivers did not practice the route, that is not a good representation of what we're dealing with.
The company behind the dozens of delays and cancellations, Zoom Transportation, a California-based tech company, awarded a 3-year, $27 million contract, accounting for more than half of the school system's total bus budget. In a statement sent to Fox 45, Zoom claiming, quote, Howard County has historically faced a major driver shortage and offering no timeline for when they'll be able to cover all of their contracted routes.
My husband is a bus driver for Howard County with a different contractor, and I know that there are companies like his where the drivers don't have enough routes. Instead of us having to drive our kids to school, they need to use some of the existing contracts to fill these routes.
And Andrew is far from the only parent voicing frustrations. Complaints continuing to pour in on social media, and overnight, this online petition demanding Superintendent Dr. Michael Martirano resign, gathering more than 200 signatures. The petition reading in part, our students deserve better. We believe that new leadership is necessary to restore confidence in the administration and ensure the well-being of our children's education.
The district signing to giving away all the bus contracts to one company that has no track record in Maryland whatsoever.
If he's doing all that and disrupting the lives of our children and their education, we think he should be held accountable.
Now, in a statement this evening, County Executive Calvin Ball added his voice to the many people calling for these transportation issues to be solved. He pointed out that over the last 4 years, the county has significantly increased the school system's transportation budget, an uptick of $18 million in the last year alone. With that in mind, today I asked the school system and the superintendent for a response to that petition and also a timeline for when these bus issues will be resolved. They didn't have any answers for me today, but they do say that they're planning a press conference to answer all of these questions tomorrow afternoon.
And so, Rebecca, we know Howard County isn't the only school system starting off the year with troubles. You also spoke with moms in Baltimore County sharing their concerns. What did they tell you?
Yeah, that's right. I spoke with a group of Baltimore County parents. They're telling me that their children were forced to sit on the floor due to their bus being overcrowded. Obviously, a very scary situation for any parent. Take a look at these images. You can see about 8 students crammed along the back of the bus without a seat on their ride to Siler's Point Technical High School. A major safety concern that had parents up in arms this week. Charity Kellner, whose daughter took some of these photos, says she immediately called the school to complain. Thankfully, she says the school system agreed that this was unacceptable and promised to send a bigger bus moving forward. However, Kellner is still questioning how this was allowed in the first place.
You know that that's wrong.
So how could you drive off with these, 8 or 9 children sitting on a floor, knowing that they are at risk?
They knew at the beginning of this, of the school year, how many children were going to be on that bus. They should be prepared for how many children are going to be on that bus and provide the proper bus.
Now, when asked for a comment, Baltimore County Public Schools assured me that a new bus that can accommodate all of the students that need to be riding on it, everyone will get a seat. They said that they promised that they would have that moving forward. However, again, they did not answer how this was allowed in the first place. Reporting live in Baltimore County, Rebecca Pryor, Fox 45 News.
Becca, thank you. Well, Howard and Baltimore County is not the only one seeing issues the first week of school. Prince George's County dealing with a bus driver shortage. Brad Bell with our Sinclair sister station joins us from D.C. with the latest on the impact there. Brad, what a mess for some of these school systems.
Yeah, look, the situation here is far worse than what's being experienced in Howard in Baltimore counties. 20 routes disrupted in Howard County. Listen to this number here. 217 bus routes that do not have drivers. The school system says they are short 213 drivers. That is creating problems all across the county. Buses not showing up, students getting home late. We saw middle school students yesterday getting home more than 2 hours after their dismissal time. We see the problem firsthand at Kenmore Middle School on the first day of school. Dismissal time is at 4:10, but at that time, only a handful of school buses stand ready to take kids home. Over the next hour and a half, they trickle in, 1 or 2 at a time. Groups of students held in the cafeteria released onto their buses up until 5:40 p.m. The problem, not a surprise. Prince George's County Schools is 213 drivers short of what is needed here. That leaves 217 open routes without drivers. The system's scrambling, sending a letter to drivers last week offering enhanced pay for those who run extra routes. The head of the drivers union asking parents not to blame those drivers, saying it's not their fault.
This is the first week of school. This can be hectic. Trying to control all of these different routes, trying to make sure that you're running on time with each one of them or as close as you possibly can. It takes a lot of juggling in order to get this done day by day.
So look, neighboring counties, Anne Arundel, Montgomery County, they are reporting that they are fully staffed with bus drivers. We went to the brand new superintendent of schools here in Prince George's County and said, why do these problems linger here? He says, well, it has gotten better. It's better last week than it was the week before, and it's better this week and so on. That is not true. We had been told they needed 135 drivers, and as we said, that number has now grown to 213. They're trying to hire. If you know anybody, they pay about $30 an hour and offer full benefits. In Prince George's County, Brad Bell, Fox 45 News.
Brad, thank you. Once students are able to get to school, keeping them safe is a top priority for parents and obviously school administrators. Fox 45's Patrice Sanders continues our team coverage.
As students return to school, safety is a top priority for parents and for school staff. Weapons being brought to school by students, strangers targeting schools for attacks. All are concerns that no parent wants to endure. Rob Weinhold, crisis leadership expert with the Falston Group, says parents are our first line of defense.
I really do believe it all starts at home. Parents having open conversations with their children and making sure that they know it's okay to let them know if they see something strange or someone acting strange or posting on social media that would appear threatening, and also that schools have an anonymous reporting system so that they can get tips to ensure that students are safe, because what we've learned from the active shooter scenarios is often there are breadcrumbs or footprints, digital footprints in particular, which would indicate that somebody's about to do something very violent.
He says that schools are also doing their part.
School systems, by and large, have to make sure that their access control protocols are in place, meaning doors are shut, windows are locked, and people can't get inside of the school except through a common entry. Also, visitor management systems. They have to make sure that they know who's coming into the school, that they're escorted, that they're badged. Cameras, of course, are strategically placed, and make sure there's liaison activity with law enforcement if there's no school resource officer. And so all of these things add up.
Now, if the unimaginable, something does happen, he says the run, hide, fight model is useful. You run as far away from the threat as you safely can. If not, you hide if you can't run until law enforcement finds you. Or if you have to, you fight for your life or the life of others. Patrice Sanders, Fox 45 News.
Fox 45 News is your back-to-school headquarters. Scan the QR code on your screen to check out all of the stories we posted so far, or go to foxbaltimore.com/backtoschoolhq.
In Anne Arundel County, the school system is filing a lawsuit against social media companies for their role in the youth mental health crisis.
That lawsuit includes popular social media sites like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. The lawsuit says companies adjusted their platforms to grow as fast as possible, and the growth has come at the cost of children's mental health.
Philip Federico is the attorney representing the school system in this lawsuit. He joins us live tonight to weigh in. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Kai.
Tell us about the correlation between social media and mental health issues. I know there have been several high-profile studies showing the link to depression and other issues.
Yeah, really what the platforms and algorithms are designed to do is addict these children to social media. They produce likes, hearts, and get really these children to spend an enormous amount of time on social media. The addiction really leads to mental health issues like anxiety, like depression, self-image problems, even suicide and suicidal ideation. So the medical community is really up in arms, and certainly the mental health community in our schools are begging for help.
Yeah, Mr. Federico, it's an interesting study. And what role do you believe parents play in limiting social media for children? And what about some who say, hey, look, why sue the companies? It's up to parents to keep their kids away from these things, maybe even if that means not getting them a device.
I've been asked that question quite frequently lately, and I analogize it to the Juul litigation. Why can't parents just keep their kids away from the Juul device? We represented over 60 school boards in the Juul litigation, and parents can't be with their kids 24/7. Sure, you can talk to your children. You have an obligation to parent them as best you can. But really, there's a limited amount that the parents can really do realistically when it comes to social media addiction, especially when the children are at school a good portion of the day. And it really isn't fair to the school and the school's budget and the people at the school to put the burden on them.
Of course, Juul was the vaping canisters and whatnot. Other than awareness, what do you hope to gain from this lawsuit?
Well, much like the Juul litigation, where there is remediation in place now to protect children from getting the Juul device, we want to do the same thing as it relates to social media. We want to make sure that these companies, and they're very big companies with great resources, really treat social media and treat the children that they're targeting with more respect in a more appropriate fashion. We believe we can achieve that through this litigation. And if we don't achieve it through the litigation, certainly Congress or state legislatures can enact laws that will really govern what happens in the future. So I really think that through healthy negotiation and understanding the problems that they are causing, we can find some common ground.
Mr. Federico, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll continue to follow the lawsuit, see what happens, get an update from you as it progresses.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, still ahead tonight, bracing for the impact in Florida. The efforts underway as Hurricane Idalia barrels toward the Sunshine State.
A new era of COVID ushering fears old policies may be coming back. I'm Christine Frizzell in Washington with that story ahead.
And we're tracking our own risk of rain, plus, of course, the tropics down to our south. I'm going to let you know coming up in a couple of minutes if Idalia is going to have any impact on us here in Maryland and if it could be for your Labor Day holiday weekend. To my Weather Authority forecast.